Is Chequers, the Brexit plan hammered out at the Prime Minister's country retreat, the only alternative to leaving the EU with no deal, as Theresa May now insists? Is it merely the right deal for now, before a better one can be negotiated, as Michael Gove argues? Or does it represent the first time since 1066 our leaders were deliberately acquiescing in foreign rule, as Boris Johnson writes this morning in The Telegraph? This may appear to be simply an argument inside the Tory party, but if recent years have taught us anything, we know that that affects all of our futures. Bernard Jenkin is a veteran of these battles. He's a lifelong campaigner for leaving the EU and a Conservative MP, of course. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, I never actually wanted to leave the EU. I thought we should negotiate from within. It was David Cameron who insisted on the in-out referendum.
Now.
That's the moment at which I decided, well, I can't vote for that lot. I'll have to vote leave.
Well, let's talk about the choice you will now face. Mrs May says you face a choice of my deal, her deal, in other words, or no deal. Do you accept it is that binary choice?
Well, something very interesting is breaking this morning, that in the Times and in the FT, the EU is trying to do what they say is de-dramatise the Irish border issue. Now, there's been no proper engagement by the British government with the paper that we produced last week.
We being the European Research Group.
But it seems that it's had an effect in the European Union, and apparently Sabine Weyand, Mr Barnier's deputy, told EU ambassadors, for the main part, these controls would not have to happen at a border. They're talking about how to ameliorate their backstop. And that is what we're talking about. The Prime Minister has rather caricatured our proposals by saying you don't solve the issue of no hard border by having a hard border 20 kilometres inside the Northern Ireland or 20 kilometres inside Ireland.
Yes, she says that in the interview we'll hear at 8:10.
Yes, but that is not our proposal. She's not engaged with our proposal, and it seems the EU is engaging with our proposal.
Let me be clear why you think that unlocks an alternative, because she still says, not just because of Northern Ireland, but because of protecting manufacturing jobs,
right.
She still says it is a case of her deal, Chequers, or no deal. Now, why do you say this unlocks that choice?
Well, it's interesting that the Irish question is being relegated as the excuse for Chequers. And let's be clear, Chequers does not take back control. We all agreed that leaving the EU meant taking back control of our laws and leaving the single market. Chequers keeps us in part of the single market and subject to what they call the common rule book, which is, of course, the EU rule book.
Forgive me, I'm going to just pick you up on one thing. We don't all agree that. In fact, there are plenty of people who campaigned for leave who said that we would stay in the single market. You may think that, but
Vote Leave said, and I can quote what the government said in their leaflet.
Yeah.
The government and Vote Leave both agreed that you could... I quote the government's leaflet. No other country has managed to secure significant access to the single market without having to follow EU rules.
But nevertheless,
now
what the Prime Minister says... Just want you to get you to respond to what she says. She responds to what she heard in Birmingham last week when the boss of Jaguar Land Rover said, if there were borders, if there were delays between a post-Brexit Britain and the EU, it would cost his business, he said, £1.2 billion a year. He predicted that tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs would be lost.
Actually, there are just-in-time supply chains that cross the Canada-US border. There are just-in-time supply trains that crossed from outside the UK into the UK across customs frontiers. A customs frontier, particularly if you have frictionless trading now being described by the EU Commission to get rid of this backstop problem, it shows you can have drive-through borders where checks are done at the plants or at the at the warehouse from which they're being exported. You don't have to have queues and checks at the border. And we're talking about tiny delays. Switzerland spends a tiny proportion of the cost of the value of their exports to the EU on customs checks. So it's not the vast numbers that some people are exaggerating.
I just want to give you the last chance in the last minute to say what the alternative is then. If it's my deal or no deal, says Theresa May, Bernard Jenkin and the European Research Group say the choice is?
Well, no deal will be preferable to the Chequers proposals, because we would instantly be free, we would save substantially on the a payment that the EU wants us to make for the implementation period. There will be some small disruption, perhaps to begin with, but of course it would be in everyone's interest to get everything working as quickly as possible.
So the Jaguar Land Rover boss who thinks that 1.2 billion isn't a small disruption, he's making it up, is he?
I'm afraid I think he's making it up. We've had figures made up all the time by the scaremongers in this debate, and I'm afraid nobody believes them. They told us there was going to be a catastrophe hitting the British economy as soon as we voted leave, and it didn't happen.
Bernard Jenkin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.